All right, back on the show. Really appreciate our conversations. Nick Knudsen from Read and Reaction, co-host of Stand Up and Holler. It's been a while, Nick. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, Mike. Doing well, man. We were talking a little bit before the show. You and cousin Shane are all over the place. You guys are doing big things. Really enjoy keeping up with you guys. So it's a pleasure to be back on.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like I was telling you off air, I mean, there's just so much negativity right now with Florida, and it may not necessarily even be within the fan base, but just kind of outside. Everybody's waiting for Billy Napier to get fired and all this, but I'm trying to be optimistic, and I know if you look at my Twitter feed, that may surprise you, Nick, but I am a little bit higher on the Florida Gators than most. I just put out my updated SEC power rankings. I got Florida number 10, which that's not where Florida should be historically, but I think that's a lot higher than many people will have them. Are you optimistic at all? Can you give us some reasons going into year 3 of Billy Napier of why Gator fans should be fired up for the upcoming season?
Well, I do think that it is a slow moving build right now. And this is something that I don't want to sell people on anything. Everything, the thing that you can look at right now is through 2 years of Billy Napier, pretty much any critique you want to make, it's yes, there's probably a valid point to make on certain things. Like there's been sloppy game day operations. There's been disappointing moments. There's been, it seems like this team is almost allergic to sustaining momentum at times. So maybe sorry for adding to the pessimism right now. I like to think I'm a relatively optimistic guy. I'll tell Will Miles to calm down, my co-host Will Miles, to calm down with all that pessimism. No, man, Will just needs to chill out, dude. He needs to relax. But it's a tough situation right now for Florida. It's kind of the perfect storm. If you look at the history of Florida football, where historically, if you go back to the pre-Spurrier years, there were a lot of difficult years. There were a lot of years where you're chasing the Georgias of the world. You're that kind of second-tier SEC program. But when Spurrier entered the scene in 1990, that shifted. But and that's where the standard has been, and that's where it should be for Florida football. That's where we believe it belongs. And when you stop believing, why should you occupy that top spot? Of course, we're going to continue to believe that because we're going to keep striving toward that and see when we can get back there. It's going to be a matter of when. It's not if, it's when. You got to keep having that attitude. But people can look at it right now and say, yeah, but it's nowhere close. And so those voices are telling the truth right now as well. So while I do want to be optimistic, and you could look at a guy coming on campus by the name of DJ Lagway, there's plenty of reason for optimism because you got the right guy at the right position coming in there. There's a lot of reasons for concern for the current addition to the Gators, not to mention we are in the middle of what might be one of the toughest stretches of schedules top to bottom in Florida Gator football history for entering into 2024.
Yeah, I'm glad you went there because I did want to ask you, what in the hell is up with the schedule? Is it all Scott Strickland? I mean, for my entire life, Nick, it's the Gators didn't play anybody in the non-conference outside of Florida State. They never left the state. All of a sudden, they ramp up the schedule. I realize you can't foresee how your team and your program's going to be, but it's like hitting all at the wrong time where the schedule's beefing up, when the program's down, while there's all these doubters. What is up with this ridiculous schedule?
Well, I'm the wrong guy to ask about this because I'm super competitive. So I love seeing Florida go play in places they've never played before. I always found the 3 non-conference games a year that were a total joke to be ridiculous. And I think it doesn't befit a program like Florida. There should be at least one. I look at a school, my family's from Ohio. I grew up watching a lot of Ohio State football. They go out and they play one tough non-conference game every year. Now, the flip side of that is you could say they don't turn around and play stretches like Georgia, LSU, and Auburn in an SEC slate, right? There's not a lot of that going on in the Big Ten, but they always get out there at least once and play a tough non-conference game. But just from an entertainment standpoint too, like I loved the road trip to Utah. The concept of it. Didn't like the actual game this year. Wasn't a fun game to watch. But we had a great time when they came to the Swamp. So there are big moments. I know down the road before Texas joined the SEC, we're going to do a home and home with Texas. There's a home and home with Notre Dame down the road, and you already have Florida State year to year. So some teams, you look up in Athens, who did they play in the non-conference? I know Oklahoma dropped off the schedule, but they didn't exactly go fill it with anyone last year. So there are some years where you see some big schools in the SEC play nobody in the non-conference. Florida has always had that Florida State game at the end of the year. And that's always a tough game. That's a tough rivalry game. So even when one of those schools is down, that's usually a relatively competitive, hard-fought game either way. So I personally like that we've ramped up these schedules, but you combine it with the fact that the SEC expanded and you're adding Texas and Oklahoma, and now we have a road game at Texas. That November stretch there, that Georgia, I believe Georgia at Texas, LSU comes to the Swamp, Ole Miss comes to the Swamp, and then you go on the road to Florida State. Woo! Mm-hmm. Woo! And I'll tell you, take how many years has Ole Miss football existed? Maybe take every year except maybe 10 years in their history, and that's a pretty favorable matchup most years. This isn't one of them right now. That's a tough game coming into the Swamp. But hey, look, for all the negativity around Florida, you look at a game like LSU. Florida was in the game against LSU last year, despite playing almost no defense and handing Jaden Daniels a Heisman in that game. You're right in the hunt against Missouri. That South Carolina game went down to the wire. So we came out on top of that. Arkansas went down the wire, lost that one as well. So we had a lot of close games that went down the wire. Even FSU, you look at that FSU game, we were up at halftime in that game. So it wasn't like this team just walked out. Like the last year Mullen was here at the end of 21, we had a couple games that were just disgusting and non-competitive and embarrassing. And we definitely had a couple of embarrassing losses this year. But in those games, there were plenty of moments of fight. And I know that you don't hang banners for that type of thing at the University of Florida. The standard is much higher at the University of Florida. But it's something that if they keep grinding and building this roster, maybe those tight results start to flip. And that's where you start to see the breakthrough.
Right. And I think lost in Florida's schedule, though, Nick, is just the first half, where none of these games are guaranteed wins, but you get a lot of them at home. Miami at home. Cristobal, I mean, he's on just as much a hot seat as Billy Napier. Sanford at home, that's a pick your score type game. A&M at home, Mike Ilko's first season. Again, not a guaranteed win, but conceivably, Florida could win that game. At Mississippi State, I'd be shocked if Florida didn't win that game. Central Florida, you got 2 weeks to prepare for it. I mean, God forbid we lose that game. But, I mean, there's a realistic path here to where we're 5-0 in Gainesville, and then the trip to Tennessee. And Cousin Shane and I know all about Tennessee being favored. It don't matter if Tennessee's favored by a damn 100 points. They'll find a way to lose that damn game. So, I mean, 6-6, even if they lost the last 6, would be improving on last year, and that's not the standard. But I'm just looking at it, Nick, and I'm seeing a path to being the surprise of the SEC. Being this time last year, Nick, Missouri fans were out on drink. They hated Brady Cook. They wanted Sam Horn. Nobody knows who in the hell Sam Horn is now because Brady Cook broke out. Because now part of that maybe was drink, gave up the play calling duties, and Billy Napier has yet to do that. And I know there's been some call for that, but I would argue Florida's offense wasn't the problem last year. So I'm just seeing some similarities. I've heard the comparisons. Could Florida be this year's Missouri Tigers?
There would have to be a lot that goes right for that time. Missouri had a great season this year. I'm not one that's quick to give a lot of credit to Missouri either. I can't. They just drive me nuts for some reason. I don't know. I should like them more than I do, but I think it's Drake. I think it's him. But he owns it at least. He owns it. But I think that that's a program a couple of years ago. You look at where they were a couple of years ago and look at that season they had. 2 years ago, you wouldn't have seen that season coming for Missouri, right? So things can shift quickly, and you get a couple of the right pieces in place, it can shift quickly. But one of the things that Missouri does a lot better than Florida right now is they play a little bit of defense there. They play a little bit of defense up there, and that is something that has been completely absent from Florida football for the last 5 years. So you go back, I know Florida's known for its offense, but look at the defensive players that came out of the Spurrier years and Urban Meyer years. The defense was loaded too. It wasn't enough to just score 50. You expected to shut people out. Those defenses were fantastic on top of that. And the scores might be like a 50-20 or something, but sometimes those 21 points that are coming in the fourth quarter, like, 2 touchdowns late in the fourth quarter when the game's out of hand, like, you want to see the Gators get back to the point where they're playing very solid defense, and that is a path that needs to be proved. That is the thing that absolutely needs to be proven. I know during the offseason, I don't even want to say his name. He's at Georgia now. The running back that went to Georgia there. It's a little bit of betrayal, a little bit of stab in the back there going to Georgia. I mean, go to anywhere else. Go to anywhere else. I like those old school rivalries in college football, but that kills me that number 7 went up to Athens there, Mike. But the running game is going to be fine. Like, we have, like, obviously, I don't think there's anyone with his level of talent in that running back room, but we have some good running backs, and there's some good young guys that people probably outside of Florida football don't know a lot about right now. We had a transfer come in last year, Cam Carroll from Tulane, who everyone was excited to see. I believe he tore his ACL in fall camp, so he's going to be back. Treyon Webb's in. They got a kid out of Mississippi, Daniels, that looks like he could be interesting too. So the running back room, plenty of talent there. Graham Mertz, if you want to find a real optimistic angle here, something that Billy Napier seems to be doing well in his early years here, and I know Richardson was up and down. I think that's a Richardson thing. I think Richardson's raw. I think he's still learning the game. That's his very first year in college started. I think you'll see some more up and down with him. We saw some up and down with him at Indianapolis for the little bit we saw him last year, and I think we'll see more of that in his pro career. But Graham Mertz was a guy that came in from Wisconsin, and when we got him in the portal, my reaction was, what? Him? We got Graham Mertz? Why? And I'll tell you what, Napier did good work with him. He played good football. Now, Will Miles wrote a great article on Read and Reaction on our website, readandreaction.com, where it really illustrated what Mertz needs to do better this year. And we really need to attack downfield. So I do think the play calling was protective of him. I do think that Napier put it in his head, don't make the big mistake. I think Will had charted out, he threw 31% of his passes behind the line of scrimmage last year. So it's a lot of side-to-side stuff. We have guys like Eugene Wilson, and we had guys like Ricky Pearsall on some quick passes last year where that worked to a point, but then there was it'd be a whole quarter or two, it'd be like a drought, right? So we didn't have that just boom, one play drive or that big play potential sitting there, and that killed us some weeks. Like a game like Tennessee where everything's going right and we ran the ball well in that first half, and what did we do the second half on offense? Almost nothing. We just kind of ran the ball and grinded the clock out, right? So, and maybe that's all we needed to do. But with our defense last year, that certainly was a little nerve-wracking down the stretch in that game. So,
right. Well, and speaking of that defense, I don't know if you would have characterized it like this, but I saw others that hiring Austin Armstrong, some people said, this will be the hire that defines Billy Napier's job in Gainesville, and clearly didn't go so well year one. I don't know how much of that is really on Armstrong. It's more about the players than anything else. But year 2 with him, Ron Roberts bringing him on staff, who knows Napier, who knows Austin Armstrong. They've all worked together. Now kind of joining forces, being I believe he's co-defensive coordinator as well. What does that do to the defense, and how big of a jump can this unit make in year 2 under Armstrong?
Even if we are an average defense next year, that's really all we have to be to make a significant improvement. It's just average. We don't have to be a good defense. We don't have to be a great defense. We just have to be an average defense to really make a serious jump in year 3 with Napier. Because like you said too, a lot of the conversation around Napier is that he should hire an offensive coordinator because the offense had struggled at times. But if you go back and actually look at the games, the offense is fine. We're fine on offense. Napier, I would argue, needs an offensive coordinator because we're too sloppy in the game day operations, and he probably needs to be more of that CEO role and like get out of the play calling sheet and start paying attention to the bigger picture type of thing. That would be my critique on him as the OC. But and paying more attention to the defensive side of the ball. There's no way you could be thinking about what you're calling on the next play and be totally plugged in on the defense at the same time. There's just no way. So just having that greater overview. It's okay to trust your guys, but especially when you bring in a young guy like Armstrong, and I see why they hired him. Like I see the point, but it was really it felt like we didn't adjust super well at times last year. And maybe bringing Robertson, you got that guy that with a little bit of seniority, with familiarity with Armstrong and everything too, that they can work together pretty well and at least bring a little bit of enhancement. The other thing is that linebacker spot is going to be a lot different than it was this year. We got some really good young talent coming in at linebacker that I'm very anxious to see how they play out. And really a lot of the secondary has turned over as well. New coach Will Harris came in, and he is recruited very well in the secondary. They just picked up a commitment from Washington safety Asa Turner, who's got a lot of experience. They're bringing in a lot of experience in that secondary, and that's something that has really bit Florida for years now. Just we've been a poor tackling team for years now, and even if we just do some fundamental things better, that will register as a significant improvement from what we've seen the last couple of years.
Well, speaking of improvement, that's what we hope we're getting. Special teams hired Joe Houston. Still unclear on his role. I don't know if he's going to be a coordinator or analyst or what have you, but I mean, they literally can't get much worse on special teams. What is the sense that unit will improve? Because hell, they had they not made so many miscues on special teams, they would have made a bowl last year.
Yeah, that was a frustrating one throughout the season, and that's something that if this is more just a generic observation here, but you tend to kind of know who a team is on special teams early on in the season. That's not something you tend to see like, oh, we were terrible on the punt unit early on, but we really got together on the punt unit. You kind of like are who you are. There's just kind of like a character within the team that shows early with special teams. You kind of know by September what your special team is going to look like in November, whereas you see a little more evolution on the offense and defensive side. And there's just stupid mistake. The first game they come out and they have two guys on the punt return unit on a fourth down that have the number 3 jersey, and one of them is one of your leaders on defense. You're wearing number 3. One of them's a true freshman that's a wide receiver, and the other one's a experienced defender that you expect is going to be one of the leaders on your defense, and they're on the field at the same time. I don't know how that happens. I don't know how that happens at all. And so if you can't handle that type of thing, you'd like to see the jersey numbers just nobody has the same jersey. Let's just move on from that stuff. This 100 guys wearing single digit jersey numbers is insane. Like, let's get away from this trend. But if you can handle it, great. If not, but we have 175 staff members. There's more staff members in the team photo than there are the actual team. So there's got to be one guy on the sideline that's going, hey. Like, I don't understand. So hopefully Joe Houston comes in and cleans some of that stuff up, because he seems like he's got a good track record with New England. And I know it was under Joe Judge with the Patriots, if I'm not mistaken. But so I don't know if he had the full role there, but it's a little vague to me because it said senior analyst. So my understanding is that analysts, can they be on the sideline but not on a headset? I'm not totally clear on that, Mike. Maybe you have more clarity, but I would hope he's at least on the sideline for game days, because otherwise we're kind of back at square one. Like, maybe it's just a cleaner operation and they just simplify things during the week and maybe it runs cleaner. But certainly they figured out the kicking game a little bit. Trey Smack was a significant improvement over Adam Mihalik. I know Smack people think of him as the guy that missed the kick against Arkansas, but he was pretty solid for most of the season. That was one kick that he missed that registered, but the rest of the season, he had a pretty good year. He missed a couple toward the end of the season, but other than that, really strong performance for most of the year from Trey Smack. He was definitely a big upgrade.
Now, I'm sure you saw these comments from Scott Strickland, but he basically said, there's no hot seat here. Billy Napier not on the hot seat. Of course, what else is he going to say? Because the moment if they have to fire Billy Napier, Scott Strickland's probably not far behind. But do you believe Billy Napier is on the hot seat based on what you're? Because I mean, all these SEC fans, non-Florida fans, the expectation is he will be fired. They're not even giving him a chance to prove himself. So it seems like Scott Strickland is way off base here by those comments. But again, I understand why he's got to say them. What is the sense you get either from you or the fans of your show?
Well, first off, there's a significant portion of the fans that talk that way. And really, I think we do make a lot of noise as a fan base. It's one of the reasons why we've chewed up and spit out coaches every 3 to 4 years for the last decade. How's that going up in Knoxville, Mike? Like, it doesn't, at some point, this is my only pushback on this. This is not a defense of Billy Napier. This is whoever is the coach of Florida right now. At some point, when do you look at this situation and say, we've been doing the same thing over and over again, it hasn't been working? We brought Napier in to build the program and to build it up. Now, he studied a certain school of doing things and how you recruit, how you do things. He has proven he's getting guys in the door. Year number 1, we get Rashada to flip, total disaster, NIL. All the rules are different, right? And our NIL team botches that completely. Botched that one completely. Big stain on the program, big stain on the Billy Napier, right? Whether it's fair or not, it is. Year 2, great class in the works. And then the last month, you lose a third of your top guys out the door, flipping somewhere. Now, that screams money to me that they're getting better money elsewhere, but that's probably not always the case in every situation. And you couldn't salvage half of those guys. You couldn't salvage half. So there's another stain right there. And so it's the adjustment to NIL has been slippery at times where we have not been solid across the board on that front. However, there are those top guys that are getting in the door. Lagway and McCray, for example, 2 of the top 5 players, depending on the service you look at, coming in. Lagway, I think 24/7 called him the top quarterback. I'm not sure about On3, but I know did On3 call him the top quarterback too this cycle? Did they just release?
I think they're their adjusted ones. They did.
Yeah, so DJ Lagway was not the top quarterback early on, worked his way up. He was in top tier, like he's borderline 5-star for most of the process, but he wasn't that number 1 for most of the cycle. He gets that at the final rankings. So you are getting that elite talent that Mullen did not bring in, that McElwain struggled to bring in, and Muschamp did bring in, but only on one side of the ball on defense. So we only saw that. He loved that defense. That defense is great. Jim McElwain can thank Will Muschamp for helping carry some years. A couple of those SEC championship runs could be attributed to some strong recruiting by Will Muschamp and on the defensive side of the ball. But we haven't had that guy that's been the full package since Urban Meyer left. And I think that Billy Napier, while you can criticize a lot on game day and you can criticize some of the approach, I know his press conferences are not going to win anybody over. There was times last year, that was the probably thing I'm most critical of is I'm like, man, some of these press conferences, I feel like I need to slap a White House logo back there. Like, what are you talking about? And like some of this stuff, I want to see a little more honesty. Just be a little more like, don't be defensive. If you have 3 terrible special teams plays and you go to the press conference and the media says, hey, how about those 3 terrible special teams plays? Don't say, can you tell me which ones you're talking about? Because then that's going to make everybody that wants to fire you say, look at this guy. He doesn't even know the 3 terrible special. And I think there's a reason why he does that. I know he's not actually asking that question. I know he's pushing back on people, and he probably gets tired of dealing with like people too on that front where it is funny that like how much those coaches have to deal with just people who don't know anywhere close to them, just questioning them constantly on everything. Yeah. That's got to be, imagine your job, people coming to you, Mike, your microphone, what do you think about that? Like every day, they have no idea what a microphone does. So I understand the frustration and I empathize with it, but that's the job. That's what the job is. And that's like something where Spurrier would sit up there and crack a joke and be like, yeah, we were pretty terrible today. And people go, yeah. And Meyer would say something like, that was awful. That'll never happen. That's a total embarrassment to the University of Florida, right? So you're getting honesty from these guys when we're not performing where we should. And I think that's okay. And I think Napier would be well served to lean into that a little more and be a little more open in that respect. Because if you're going to struggle, try to win some hearts and minds along the way. Because Billy Napier, I don't think anybody thinks Billy Napier's a bad guy. I don't think anybody's rooting actively against Billy Napier as a person. I think he's a great face for the school in a lot of ways, and I want him to succeed at Florida, but the results do have to follow. The other thing to consider, Mike, when this hot seat conversation, this is not the same hot seat conversation that you've had in the past. You can't just say not working out, pay him the money, get a new guy in here, let's try again. Because Urban Meyer won that title in 2006. You come in, a lot of that roster was built by Ron Zook, right? Who was the starting quarterback in 2006? Everyone, Chris Leak, not Tim Tebow. Chris Leak, the quarterback that was recruited by Ron Zook, right? Comes in, Ron Zook plays as a true freshman, one of the first true freshmen to start at Florida. And he had the benefit, Meyer had the benefit of some of those strong players that were brought in from Zook. How many players left Alabama when Saban leaves? And that's Saban, and that's Alabama. So you're seeing Caleb Downs thinks like, hey, good for him. He probably got a solid deal going up to Ohio State there. But even Alabama loses coaches during turnover right now. So or loses players during its coaching turnover. So when you have a guy like DJ Lagway, you see 1/3 year class flip at the last second. You have a quarterback that's stuck with you through the whole cycle because he clearly wants to play for Napier. I know he's going to say Florida, but it's Napier. And if Napier goes out the door, you're going to watch that guy walk out the door too. And you're going to watch the little progress we've made so far get pushed back to zero and reset and restart. And maybe some people are okay with that. But to me, I would like to see the Lagway experiment play out. I think that needs time. I think it's unrealistic to think that's going to be the full picture his freshman year. And I would think by the time Georgia of 25 rolls around, we'll have a more complete picture of what the Billy Napier era is going to look like at Florida. And I would like to see that timeline. I would like to see safe through 24, especially with this schedule. Go through and be honest with yourself as a Florida fan. How many guaranteed wins are on that schedule right now? How many guarantee that you'd be willing to bet a lot of money are guaranteed wins on that schedule right now? It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to measure it just by wins losses this year, which is a terrible thing to say. It hurts my heart to even say that, but you have to look at the bigger picture right now. And I think you have to look at this guy, DJ Lagway, could be the thing that's keeping Billy Napier in business for that extra year. Let's see how that goes. Let's see where we're at. I would like to see a lot of DJ Lagway this year, though. If we're 3-3 and Graham Mertz is rolling out as a starter, that's rough, Mike. We need to I think Lagway needs to be worked in as quickly as possible, even though the tone out of Gainesville is that Graham Mertz is the guy and Lagway is going to sit and learn under him, which there is some benefit to, but college football is different now. And I do think you need to get those younger guys in there quicker. And I hope to see that this year from Napier.
Well, that being said, if you can't, the record is not a great indication. What is it going to take for Billy Napier for his job to be secure? And it doesn't have to be a record prediction or anything. Maybe is it an upset? Because it's short of that Tennessee game. Again, they own Tennessee, but short of Tennessee, his record in rivalries is pretty poor. Would it be pulling an upset in one of these rivalries? Will it be DJ Lagway flashing that he is this elite prospect? What was it going to take, you think, for Billy Napier to be the coach at Florida in 2025?
Well, obviously, and look, when you just said that, I don't want my name to be attached to the record is not an indicator of performance. Obviously it is, right? The record is obviously an indicator of performance, and you need to show some progress on that. But how do you define progress in a situation where you have this murderer's row of a schedule this year? If you're sitting there saying Billy Napier has to win 9 games to keep his job, why are we even doing this? Let's just move on right now. We're probably not winning 9 this year. If we did, great. I'd be thrilled. I'd be celebrating with everybody else about it. But realistically, we're playing a lot of schools that are contending, that are solid college football playoff contenders. It's just how deep this league is. It's a tough league. And so if you look at the bigger picture and I want to see where this is going. Let's see how this 25 recruiting class fills out. We got some good prospects in so far. There's a lot of top names still visiting and in the mix. So let's see if we can let's see if we make progress in that department and actually keep them, right? This past year, we don't have a disaster that's going to get us an NCAA investigation, hopefully. But we did lose a third of the class, Mike, at the last minute. Can we fix that? Are there areas where we can make progress? And it's a slow rebuild. And this is coming from someone. I think the difference from what you'll hear from me and what you hear from other people, as a Florida fan, it breaks my heart to have to get this nuanced about it, because it should just be wins and losses, right? It should. But you have to start looking at it this way, because I accept the fact that we're not that program that won 2 national titles in 3 years. We're not that program right now. And we have a long road to get back to being that program. And I think you do have to keep that big picture in mind with especially a guy like Lagway. That's a guy that can be special. If we can show some progress this year on the field, be competitive in a lot of these games, I don't want to see the 700-yard Jaden Daniels game this year. Like, we can't have these embarrassments at all. Like, that's the part we can clean up. We might not win at the rate we want to, but are we showing progress on defense? Is Lagway looking really promising? Are some of these young guys looking great on the field? A couple more freshmen stepping in the way Trey Wilson stepped in last year. Do we see more impact players across the board coming in, and that base of a roster really being built and Billy Napier's vision coming to fruition? Or do we see a lot of what we saw this year? Inconsistency, up and down, sloppiness, no plan week to week on who we are, no identity. Do we see more of that? So we do have to see progress, and we have to kind of know who we are, who's going to be that core group going forward, and what this team's going to, what the vision is. We have to start seeing that vision this year.
So do you think it is realistic, though, if it is more the same as last year, very inconsistent, up and down, and mistakes killing the team, that Napier could get let go?
Sure, anything's possible. Anything's possible this year, and that's what I think. I think a segment of our fan base would make the move tomorrow if you let them. But I'm from the camp that I've seen this story. We've seen it with Muschamp. At the time, it made sense. We get a guy like McElwain. Okay, do you think that when we fired Will Muschamp, that most Gator fans were like, I want to fire him to go hire Jim McElwain. Let's do that. And then Dan Mullen was a welcome addition because of his time at Florida, but he certainly was not the first choice. And we could have hired Dan Mullen at a couple other points along the way, and we didn't do it. So again, he was not the first option coming into Gainesville, but that's who we ended up with. And then Billy Napier this cycle. So you ask people, it's like, okay, so let's say you do fire Billy Napier. Let's go down that path. Who are you hiring? What's the short list? What's the short list tomorrow? Well, okay, you don't have the names. Okay, let's
Jed
go.
Fish.
Yeah, Jed Fish, right. Jed Fish. Let's go name the traits. And then you say, well, I'd like a coach that he's coached at some good programs as an assistant. He went off and proved himself in a higher role, like an offensive coordinator somewhere. And then he became a head coach at a smaller program and had some success for 4 years on and off the field. I'm like, okay, you just described Billy Napier. So you're just going to roll the dice with another guy that is Billy Napier again. And so I'm looking at it like, if Napier didn't have a guy like Lagway in the fold, like if he's like, oh, I'm an offensive guy, he's got that top quarterback in the door. I'm very interested. I think that could be his saving grace early on. And I think that if you start over, are you going to keep these top guys that you have? And I'd say the answer right now, from what we've seen from Alabama, what we've seen in other programs, I think the answer is no. I think you lose a lot of your roster goes out the door tomorrow, and you're starting almost from scratch in some areas. Now, Alabama starting from scratch looks a lot nicer than a lot of people starting from scratch, because Alabama's they're still going to be in the college football playoff, and they still got a heck of a roster sitting there in Tuscaloosa. That's not the case in Gainesville. We can't really afford to do that. So I think people should start thinking in those terms and not just thinking turnover for the sake of turnover on that. So, and that's not a Billy Napier defense. If anybody was the coach right now, I'd be saying the same thing. How many times are we going to do this? Are we going to be the school that just rolls over every 3 years like this? Or are we going to take the time and invest in something? And I know that Billy Napier, you would not give him straight A's on the report card at all right now. Like, you wouldn't give him any A's right now, actually, at all. But he does have the profile makes sense. He's getting top guys in the door. There are some things that have worked against him early on. There are some things that are his fault. There are some things that are extenuating circumstances so far. And I do think that that's a lot of explaining. And when you have to explain that much, maybe you should move on, Mike. I don't know. But I do think that there is another point. There's a more nuanced way to look at the situation right now with Napier and just the hire fire thing. Okay, cool. So it's Jed Fish. And by the way, Jed Fish is a cool story because if anybody knows how he got his start at Florida, he just was leaving notes on Spurrier's car as a student. And he was roommates with Howie Roseman, the Eagles GM at Florida. So, like, he's got a cool background, a cool connection with Florida. But again, is Jed Fish a guarantee? If I told you 3 years ago that Jed Fish was the solution, people would have been like, what? Like, I don't know. And he just took a new job, by the way. So he's a little occupied with the new job he's got up in Seattle at the moment. But I don't know. So we're going to go down to USF and hire the old Tennessee offensive coordinator into next, like, and then it's going to be the same story, Mike. I don't know.
Right. But I'll leave you with this, Nick. I don't know if you saw this exchange I had with friend of the show, Brad Powers. He's a professional Las Vegas handicapper. And I was just talking over-unders, and I said Florida over-under 6. And he said, given their schedule, to win 6 games, you'd have to be an average top 20 team in the country. And he said, no shot in hell is Florida top 20 in the nation, which I would agree with today. But that doesn't mean by the end of the season they can't rise to that level. But that's just kind of a sobering comment, and it just kind of goes to what you're saying of just how difficult this schedule is for the Gators.
Yeah, look, there's a couple teams out there. I know that back half of the schedule we've mentioned. The front half of the schedule, the easy part, quote unquote, the easy part. There's a lot of challenges on that easy part too. There's a lot of that front half. You still got to go to Knoxville. Starkville's never an easy road trip, right? And then Kentucky. I'm not sure if you paid close attention to the last 5 years of Florida and Kentucky. It's no guarantee anymore, though. So Kentucky is a thorn in our side. Like when Mark Stoops was about to leave Kentucky, like that, when those A&M rumors were flying, I was like, yes, I was way too fired up about Mark Stoops leaving Kentucky. But I have respect for Kentucky. They have handled us in recent years, and I don't want to have respect for Kentucky. I want to go back to not respecting Kentucky and just marking the W when the schedule comes out, but you have to. They've done a great job up in Lexington. Miami's certainly a toss-up early on there. A&M's a toss-up. You got coming in the swamp. So it depends on where that schedule is in that first half. We have to really do well in that first half of the schedule. But we were 5-2 at the turn this year. You know, every year there's that bye week before Georgia, so that's kind of our mid-season routine. So we have that. So we were 5-2 because we beat South Carolina going into that Georgia game, and things were optimistic. People were feeling real good about the team, and that South Carolina game, we had lost a lot of those close games with Billy Napier. We come through and we win one. That's great. We were pretty high going into that, thinking like, okay, like Georgia's going to be tough, but Arkansas at home, you got Missouri, you got a couple winnable games here. Maybe we pull the upset Florida State. Maybe it's 7-8 wins. And you end up losing just 5 straight to end the season. That's tough. So we saw that happen this year where the front half was solid and the back half just destroyed you. So I think we're setting up for a similar thing. I think because that happened last year, people are going to be more inclined to say it's going to happen again. Hey, like I find Lane Kiffin as entertaining as anybody. I understand Ole Miss just tore up the transfer portal. I listen to your show, Mike. I know you love Ole Miss right now. But would you be shocked if that turned into a disaster situation? Would you be stunned?
Not at all.
No, dude. No. Like, so they're coming in November. So if they're competing for a playoff spot, yeah, we're in trouble potentially. But if the wheels fall off the bus sometime in October and there's, infighting on the team and it's a transfer heavy team and guys are split and Lane's talking trash about this guy on Twitter or that, I don't know, more leaked tapes of Lane Kiffin talking to people like come out. I don't know. Like there's a lot that Ole Miss is one of those teams that like they're going to be widely entertaining one way or the other this year. But LSU is certainly a tough game. Not impossible. We've been competitive with them for a couple of years there. And hey, although Texas did make that playoff run, they were super competitive with a lot of Big 12 teams last year. How are they going to handle that week to week grind? We get that team in November. So let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. So right now the schedule looks a certain way. It might look a lot different by the middle of October though. So I don't want to write anything off with this team right now, but certainly where we stand for what we know the rosters to be at this moment here on this wonderful day in early February, it does look pretty rough to get to 6 right now. I would say that under is probably the way to lean at the moment, but who knows? It might look different. It might look different down the road.
Right. We came into this conversation saying we're going to be positive. I don't know that we accomplished that goal, but it is what it is. Nick, before you go, can you tell the audience how can they follow you? How can they find your work?
My name's Nick Knudsen. I'm with Read and Reaction. We do a weekly show called Stand Up and Holler. I do it with my co-host Will Miles. He also does another show with Gators Breakdown as well. But Read and Reaction is the blog. Read and Reaction YouTube channel. Stand Up and Holler. And again, one of the things that Will and we try to do in the show, it's not just about feeling good all the time. We try to tell it like it is. We want to tell the full story. That's why I give really long answers when Mike says, "Are you on the hot seat?" It's not a yes, no question for me. We try to tell the full picture. We try to tell the full picture, and not all the answers are pretty right now. So that's why I'm just saying what I'm seeing at the moment. So I'm trying to be realistic about the situation, and like we don't sugarcoat it because we do have a championship standard. We want to see this program get back to where we believe it should belong, and I do think there is a path here. It's just that path it's shrinking a little bit. It's become more and more narrow. They got to hit a much smaller window here, Mike. So hopefully they can get it done. We'll see how it
I,
goes.
I just can't wait for the Gators to go start 5-0 and see the playoff tweets coming from Nick. He'll throw all that in the gutter. We're going to the playoffs under Billy Napier, year 3. Year 3 is the year.
Hey, I like I said, I like Napier. I'm rooting for the guy. I just it's tough right now, and our we are relentless too. Our fan base is relentless. It is the type of job that does eat up coaches. But at the same time, I do not want to go into the hire fire cycle every 3 years. I think you do need to. I'm more patient than a lot of people, so I might not. This might not be a popular opinion among Florida fans, but I would like to see Napier get more time, and I would like to see. I think Scott Strickland's definitely got a vested interest there because he's probably going before Napier if they go down that road. So, but I do think Napier's got that kind of support in Gainesville, and I think that's something that should be considered. That I think the national conversation misses. I think they miss just how committed that to Napier that the administration is. So I do believe that this administration, short of going some disastrous 3-9 or something this year, I do believe Billy Napier will be the head coach of the University of Florida going into the 2025 season.